Hello, family. Before we dive into today's story, I want to take a moment to send some love and gratitude to all of my amazing listeners from across Africa. Your support truly means the world to me. Remember, I rotate these shout outs to celebrate listeners from all over. So stay tuned. Your country or continent might be next. Thank you for being here, and let's get into the story. Mwangi gave everything for love. Every shilling he earned, every sleepless night was for her dream and their future together. But when he traveled to see her, he discovered a painful truth. What happens when the person you trust the most leaves you broken? Stay with us as we follow Mwangi's journey from heartbreak to finding true strength. In the small, quiet village of Ngoma in central Kenya, everyone knew Mwangi Njoroge as a man of his word. Raised by his aunt, Mama Amina, after losing his parents at a young age, he had developed a sense of responsibility beyond his years. His life was simple, yet he dreamed big, and every shilling he earned from helping local farmers and vendors was saved in hopes of a brighter future. One brisk evening during the harvest festival, Mwangi's life changed. Amidst the laughter, dancing, and song that filled the air, he met Nia Wanjiru, a young woman from Nairobi visiting her grandmother. Nia's beauty was captivating, but it was her passion and ambition that drew him in. As they strolled away from the festival lights and spoke under the stars, she revealed her dreams of becoming a doctor and helping others. "I want to give back to my community," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "But it's hard. School fees are high, and my family can't afford them." Moved by her words, Mwangi felt a surge of determination. He took her hand, looking into her hopeful eyes. "Nia," he began, heart pounding, "let me help you. I'll support your education. When you become a doctor, we can start our life together." Nia's eyes sparkled with tears. "You'd do that for me, Mwangi? If you help me, I promise when I finish school, I'll marry you. We'll build a future together." From that night forward, Mwangi committed himself to her dream, believing that their shared future would make every sacrifice worthwhile. As the weeks passed, Mwangi and Nia's connection grew. They spent evenings writing long letters to each other, filled with dreams of their future, plans for a family, and hopes for the village they would one day return to. Each visit Mwangi managed to make to Nairobi strengthened their bond, and despite the sacrifices he was making, his love for Nia grew deeper. Driven by his promise, Mwangi spent each day working as hard as he could. He rose with the sun, helping farmers with their crops, and stayed up late, helping Mama Amina with her produce stand. Eventually, he even took on a night shift guarding a small petrol station on the village's outskirts, barely sleeping between jobs. Every month, he sent money to Nia, scrimping on his own needs to ensure she had enough for school fees, rent, and meals. Though the work was grueling, the thought of Nia thriving in her studies kept him going. "Are you sure about this?" his friend Kariuki would ask when they shared a simple meal at the end of a long day. "You're giving her everything, Mwangi. What if she changes her mind?" Mwangi would shake his head, smiling faintly. "Nia wouldn't do that. She promised Kariuki, 'We're going to build a future together.'" But Kariuki's words lingered in the back of his mind, especially on long, lonely nights when he sat counting his meager savings by candlelight, writing heartfelt letters to Nia. Yet each letter he received from her was filled with warmth and affection, reinforcing his trust in her. Mama Amina, too, voiced her concern. "My son," she said, eyes filled with worry, "it is good to give, but don't lose yourself in someone else's dream. You have a future too." But Mwangi was steadfast, and every word from Nia reassured him that he was doing the right thing. Even as the hard day stretched on, the image of a future with her kept him going. The years passed slowly, with each letter from Nia becoming shorter, her calls less frequent. Mwangi's heart ached with the distance, but he told himself it was the demands of school. She's just busy with her studies, he'd tell himself. One evening, he sat with Kariuki as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, bathing the village fields in golden light. "I don't want to see you hurt, brother," Kariuki said, his voice gentle. "People change, especially in the city. She might have forgotten where she came from." Mwangi looked off into the distance, swallowing the doubt that rose in his throat. "She promised me, Kariuki. I trust her." Still, the silence grew heavier with each passing month, and though Mwangi's heart urged him to keep believing, the small seed of doubt took root, leaving him feeling uneasy and anxious. Meanwhile, in Nairobi, Nia's life had changed dramatically. She had befriended Kwame Odhiambo, a confident, charismatic classmate who came from a wealthy family. Drawn into his world of expensive dinners, weekend trips, and carefree living, Nia found herself fascinated by the freedom and luxury that surrounded him. In Kwame's presence, her memories of Ngoma and the life she had once imagined with Mwangi seemed far away, almost like a dream she could barely recall. Though she still remembered Mwangi's kindness, the excitement of her new life clouded her feelings, and her letters to Mwangi became shorter, filled with half-hearted promises she struggled to believe in herself. Yet, as she fell deeper into the thrill of her new life, a part of Nia wrestled with guilt. Late at night, she would lie awake, haunted by Mwangi's sacrifices. She knew the life he had given up to support her, and it pained her to feel her connection to him slipping away. Each time she sat to write him, her hand hesitated over the words. Could she really turn her back on the promises they had made? One evening, as they sat in a dimly lit restaurant, Kwame leaned in close, his voice smooth and persuasive. "Why waste your time with small dreams, Nia? The world is waiting for us, and we could have so much more." In that moment, the promises she'd made to Mwangi seemed naive, and a pang of guilt began to gnaw at her heart. Her dreams of returning to Ngoma felt distant, and she started to convince herself that they were no longer aligned. That evening, after a long day of classes, Nia sat by her window, pen in hand, staring at the blank page of a letter she meant to write to Mwangi. The words wouldn't come. She remembered his kindness, the late nights he had spent working to support her dream, and the sacrifices he had made. Glancing across her room filled with books and the life she had come to know in Nairobi, she felt a pang of guilt. She began to write, "Mwangi, I miss Ngoma and I miss you," but then hesitated, her hand trembling. The truth weighed on her heavily. She was drifting further from the life they'd once imagined. As Kwame's voice echoed from the next room, laughing with friends, Nia folded the unfinished letter, tucked it away, and told herself she'd send it another day. But deep down, she knew her silence was becoming a truth in itself. After nearly 2 years of silence and short responses, Mwangi felt an overwhelming urge to see Nia. Saving up his earnings, he took a bus to Nairobi, his heart racing with excitement and trepidation. With a bouquet of wildflowers in hand, he arrived at her apartment building, nervous yet hopeful. But as he approached, he saw her laughing with Kwame, their hands entwined as they walked. Mwangi's heart sank, and he felt the ground shift beneath him. Summoning every bit of courage, he approached her. "Nia," he called softly, his voice barely a whisper. Startled, Nia turned to face him, her expression a mixture of shock and discomfort. As Kwame looked on, Nia hesitated, then finally spoke. "Mwangi, I didn't expect you to come here." Her voice was cold, a far cry from the warm promises she'd made. "Nia, Is this how it is? He asked, his heart breaking with every word. After everything I've given you? She took a deep breath, eyes downcast. I'm sorry, Mwangi. I was young when I made those promises. I've changed. With that, Mwangi's world shattered, and he left, his dreams and trust in ruins. When Mwangi returned to Ngoma, he was a hollow shell of the man he once was. The pain of betrayal was suffocating, and he isolated himself from everyone, drowning in his regret. Every effort he'd made, every coin he'd earned, felt like a wound he could never heal. Mama Amina tried to comfort him, but her words fell on deaf ears. He replayed Nia's cold words over and over, struggling to make sense of it all. The friends who once celebrated his loyalty now watched in silence, pitying the man whose faith had left him broken. For weeks, Mwangi wandered aimlessly, wrestling with the weight of his choices. Nights were the hardest, filled with regret, and the echo of promises turned to dust. Late one night, Mwangi sat on the steps of his empty house, the distant sounds of the village fading into silence. He thought of all he had given to Nia, all the dreams they had once shared, now scattered like dust. What did I lose myself for? He whispered to the night sky, as if hoping for an answer. He remembered the countless hours of labor, the moments he spent dreaming of a future that had never come to be. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a life that was his own, a future where he might not be bound by promises to anyone but himself. Slowly, he began to feel a faint flicker of purpose, and though it was fragile, he held onto it as tightly as he could. One day, Mwangi encountered Mr. Kimani, an elder who owned a construction business. Mr. Kimani, known for his kindness, had heard of Mwangi's troubles and offered him a position in his company. At first, Mwangi was reluctant, feeling unworthy, but eventually he accepted, realizing he had little left to lose. As he threw himself into the work, he found solace in the routine. Mr. Kimani encouraged him, teaching him the ropes of the trade and inspiring Mwangi to start attending night classes in business. With time, Mwangi began to find a new purpose. The work demanded his focus, and the steady growth of his skills rekindled a spark of hope. Slowly, he realized that he could still build a future, perhaps even brighter than the one he had once imagined with Nia. Years had passed since the day Mwangi's world crumbled. He was now a manager at Mr. Kimani's company, overseeing projects and working alongside skilled laborers whom he trained with patience and dedication. Each day, Mwangi's confidence grew, his life built on purpose and resilience. The boy who had once given everything for a dream that wasn't his had become a man who charted his own path. One morning, as Mwangi strolled through the crowded marketplace, his gaze fell on a familiar figure. It was Nia. She looked different, a baby balanced on her hip and a worn look in her eyes. Her once vibrant face was lined with worry, her shoulders weighed down by a heaviness he couldn't ignore. For a moment, he hesitated, unsure whether to approach. But as he took a step toward her, she looked up, their eyes meeting across the bustling market. Recognition washed over her, and she drew a sharp breath, her lips parting slightly in surprise. After a pause, she walked over, her eyes filling with a mix of longing, regret, and perhaps even shame. "Mwangi," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced down at the child in her arms, stroking his back gently as if drawing strength from his warmth. "I didn't think I'd see you again." Mwangi nodded, noticing the exhaustion etched across her face. "Nia, it's been a long time." She swallowed, looking away. "I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry, Mwangi, for everything." Her voice wavered, and her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. "I was wrong, so wrong. I thought I was chasing something bigger, something more, but I lost sight of what really mattered. I lost sight of you. Mwangi listened, a flicker of compassion stirring in him as he took in her worn appearance, the child now asleep in her arms. Is that your son? He asked gently, trying to ease the tension between them. Nia nodded, her voice filled with a mix of pride and sorrow. His name is Sam. He's everything to me. She hesitated, as if choosing her next words carefully. Kwame left us. When he found someone wealthier, he moved on without looking back. I deferred my studies to take care of Sam, and now I don't know if I'll ever get to finish. I want to go back, but it's hard to see how. Her admission was raw, each word laced with the vulnerability of someone who had once tasted ambition, but now lived with the weight of unfulfilled dreams. Mwangi felt a pang of sympathy, remembering the ambitious girl she had been, the one who once spoke of giving back to her community. Tears welled up in Nia's eyes as she continued. I didn't just lose the future I imagined, Mwangi. I lost you. I missed the kindness you showed me, the sacrifices you made. I remember those late nights you spent working just to support me, she whispered, her gaze fixed on the ground. I didn't see it then. I didn't realize how much you were giving up. I thought I wanted something different, something bigger. But the truth is, I didn't understand what I already had. Her words hung in the air, a painful echo of choices made and promises broken. Mwangi felt the weight of her apology, the sincerity in her eyes. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the sadness of what might have been, of the life he had once dreamed of with her. But as he looked at her now, he realized that time had healed his heart in ways he hadn't anticipated. The love he once held for her was gone, replaced by a gentle compassion that expected nothing. He had found peace, built a life of his own, and grown into someone he respected. Nia, he said softly, his tone steady. We were both young. We both made choices that seemed right at the time. But I don't regret any of it because it taught me something I needed to learn. I needed to find my own path, and I have. She looked down, a single tear slipping down her cheek as she nodded, understanding that the man standing before her was no longer bound by the promises they had made. I'm glad, Mwangi, you deserve the happiness I couldn't give you. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a final gesture of forgiveness. Take care of yourself, Nia, and Sam. You'll find your way. As he turned to leave, he felt a profound sense of closure. The pain that had once defined him was now a distant memory, and he walked away, free at last from the shadows of the past. With a clear heart, Mwangi continued to thrive. Mr. Kimani, impressed by Mwangi's dedication, offered him a partnership, allowing him to take on greater responsibilities. As he built his career, he finally felt proud, secure, and at peace. The once broken young man had become resilient, and he knew his journey had given him a strength that could not be shaken. In time, Mwangi met Wanjiku Kioni, a teacher who shared his love for the village. Their connection blossomed slowly, grounded in respect and shared values. Wanjiku admired Mwangi's honesty, and together they dreamed of a future filled with love, laughter, and purpose. With Wanjiku, it was different. There was no need for promises or sacrifices. Their dreams grew naturally, side by side. With her, he was enough, just as he was. They spent quiet evenings sharing stories, talking about their dreams for the village, and supporting each other's ambitions. Wanjiku became not only Mwangi's partner, but also his confidant and friend. As Mwangi looked out over the fields one evening, with Wanjiku by his side, he felt the fullness of his journey. He had given up everything for a dream that wasn't his own, only to find that his true destiny was waiting all along. The end. Thanks for listening.